Okay, good day everyone. So for today, we will going to present to you one parts of the disability, and this is the visual impairments. So before we proceed, I would like to introduce to you myself and my group mates. First, we have Ma'am Jelaine and Tubira Pangilinan. Yours truly, Peter Janice Take Paulino. And last, we have Ma'am Lee Jane Omelgo Kinatadkan. So this is our group. So report content, history of proponents, definition and classification, prevalence rates, teaching strategies, educational program, research study and discuss findings, and some biblical verses or Ellen White passages regarding to our report about visual impairments. So now let's proceed to the history of visual impairments. In 1784, the first school for blind was established in Paris, France by Valentin Hay. 1791, first school for blind established in Liverpool, England. 1993, France had first mandatory school for the blind. 1808, Charles Barber invents écriture nocturne or night writing for use by French soldier at night. 1827, James Gall published first book for teaching the art of reading to the blind and the first English language work in race type. 1829, Louis Braille published an explanation of his imposed that code inspired by Barbie. 1829, the New England Asylum for the Blind, later the Firkin School for the Blind, was incorporated in Watertown, MA. 1831, the New York Institution for the Education of the Blind, now the New York Institute for Special Education, was incorporated. 1832, the Pennsylvania Institution for the Instruction of the Blind, later the Overbrook School for the Blind, was founded. 1833, the Gospel of St. Mark was printed in Philadelphia. It was the first book in race print in the United States. 1834, Louis Braille perfects the Literacy Braille Code. 1837, the Perkins School for the Blind established a printing plant, later named the Howe Memorial Press. In 1839, the state-supported normal school for training general education teacher is started in Lexington, MA. 1854, France officially adopts Braille as reading mode for people who are blind. So if you don't know the Braille reading mode for people who are blind, this is the a large book or long book which is have that letter there, and if the student touch that they can identify what word is that, so they will learn about the word using that word or that mood by Braille. Next, in 1858, seven states established Reed Central Printing House or the American Printing House. 1860, the Missouri School for Blind becomes the first institute in the United States to use Braille. 1872, the Scottish Education Act calls for educating children who are blind with sighted children. 1878, Joel W. Smith at the Perkins School for the Blind develops the American Race Point system, modeled closely on Braille, which became the foundation for American Braille. 1879 Act to promote education of the blind and establish quota funds. 1873 Children aged 0 to 22 who are blind receive an education. 1903 Helen Keller was the first student who is deaf blind to receive a college degree. 1905 the New York Association for Blind, now Lighthouse International, was founded. 1915 the National Society for the Prevention of Blindness was founded. In 1918, 3 years later, the University of California offers the first university preparation courses for teachers of students who are blind. In 1921, the American Foundation for the Blind was founded. 1922, the Council for Exceptional Children was founded. 1929, the Seeing Eye, the first dog guide school in the United States, was incorporated. 1931, the Library of Congress established the National Library Service for the blind and physically handicapped. It began distributing Braille and the recorded materials in accordance with the Pratt-Smoot Act of 1930. 1935, the Social Security Act is passed. It adopts the AMA's definition of legal blindness. 1940, the National Federation of the Blind was founded. 1947, the Perkins Braille is designed and developed by David Abraham of the Howie Press. 1948, Recording for the Blind, or RFB, is established. 1954, the Feinbrook Report identifies different educational options for students who are blind or visual impaired and the types of teacher preparation required. In 1960, U.S. conducts a study outlined in the Comstock reports determine a need for orientation and mobility specialists. In 1960 also, Boston College started the first university program for orientation and mobility specialists, mobility instructors. In 1961, the American Council of the Blind was founded. In 1966, the CEC project on professional standards defined visually handicapped to include both blind and partially sighted. 1970, CCTVs become commercially available. Year 2000, Academy for Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals is established. Year 2000, also, American Foundation for the Blind National Literacy Center established. And last, year 2000, 2001, Bookshare, a source of downloadable books, was founded. So this is the history timeline of visual impairments.
Visual impairment is a decreased ability to see to a degree that causes problems not fixable by usual means, such as glasses. Visual impairment may cause people difficulties with their normal or daily activities such as driving, reading, socializing, and walking. Visual impairment is a term experts use to describe any kind of vision loss, whether it is someone who cannot see at all or someone who has partial vision loss. Visual impairment can limit the people's ability to perform everyday tasks and can affect their quality of life and ability to interact with the surrounding world. Students with visual impairments are infants, toddlers, children, and youth who experience impairment of the visual system that impacts their learning ability. And now, let us proceed with the classifications of visual impairment. The World Health Organization uses the following classifications of visual impairment. 2030 to 2060 is considered as mild vision loss or near normal vision.
Partially sighted, a visual impairment that adversely affects a student's education performance even when corrected to the extent possible.
2070 to 2160 is considered as moderate vision impairment or moderate low vision. 2200 to 2400 is considered as severe visual impairment or severe low vision. 2500 to 21,000 is considered as profound visual impairment or profound low vision. More than 21,000 is considered as near total visual impairment or near total blindness. No light perception is considered as total visual impairment or total blindness.
For the continuation of our report, we're going to talk about the prevalence of visual impairment. But before that, what is prevalence? So prevalence is the proportion of the population who have an specific characteristic in a given time period. So what is prevalence of visual impairment? The prevalence of visual impairment was markedly high in this study. Lack of access to health services was the main reason for the high prevalence of visual impairment in this study. Cataract and refractive errors are responsible for 80% of visual impairments, which can be due to poverty and undeserved villages. The prevalence of visual impairment and blindness in underserved rural areas a crucial issue for future. In rural areas, there is less to healthcare services compared to urban areas due to the bad road conditions and poverty. Recent studies have pointed to higher prevalence rate of visual impairment in rural areas on account of lack of access to health care services, lack of cataract surgery. So since people in rural areas can provide glasses with difficulty due to financial problems and accessibility issues, effective strategies should be designed to provide the rural population with low-cost corrected glasses. Moreover, offering cataract surgery services in rural areas can also markedly decrease the prevalence of blindness and society. On the other hand, a great proportion of visual impairment, 81%, and blindness, 51.41%, were due to uncorrected refractive errors and cataract, which are both preventable and correctable using glasses and an inexpensive way of correcting refractive errors in developing countries. So, however, the capacity of health system to confront the disease should be considered before screening. Diabetic retinopathy alone was responsible for 0.52% or 4.52% of the cases of visual impairment and 7.69% of the cases of blindness. The prevalence of diabetes mellitus in increasing in the world, therefore, blindness and visual impairment due to the diabetic retinopathy will be more prevalent in the coming years. A marked decrease in diabetic retinopathy-related visual impairment can be achieved through screening and timely treatment. Then, it is so difficult. It is so difficult to obtain an exact prevalence of visual impairment due to the often hidden nature of visual impairment in special education. So the National Dissemination Center for Children with Disability reports that the rate of occurrence of visual impairments in individuals under the age of 18 is at the rate of 12.2 per 1,000. Legal or total blindness occurs at a rate of 0.6 per 1,000. So many students with visual impairment also have additional coexisting impairments and are thus classified in an alternate disability category. And the current special education demographics obtained from the American Foundation for the Blind 2009 report that there are 93,600 students who are visually impaired or blind and 55,200 students who are legally blind and there are 5,500 Braille.
As future educators, our main priority is to ensure that all of our students have an equal opportunity to access all learning materials and succeed in our course. To teach visually impaired or blind students, we should modify our teaching strategy, allow for the use of visual aids and assistive technology, and create a safe learning environment. Let's talk about the teaching strategies. First, always give oral instructions.
Do not provide your students with a handout that contains assignment instructions. Visually impaired or blind students may have difficulty seeing the words and learning what is expected. Instead, always give oral instructions for every assignment and activity.
Second, provide tactile learning experiences.
Teaching a class with visually impaired or blind students, try to incorporate tactile learning experiences whenever possible. For example, instead of talking about rocks and showing images of different types of rocks, you should actually have physical rocks available in the classroom for the students to touch. This can also be done with different foods, shells, properties of matter, and etc. This will allow your students to explore and learn without relying solely on sight.
Third, give visually impaired or blind students additional time to complete their work.
In some instances, visually impaired or blind students may need extra time to complete their assignments and tests. This is typically because reading Braille or using some form of technological aid can take additional time. Although we want to give an appropriate amount of time for visually impaired or blind students to complete their work, still, we do not want them to use their vision as an excuse to hand in their work late.
And lastly, number 4, consider the curriculum.
We need to modify the curriculum and the way we teach the curriculum in order to meet the students' needs. For example, when teaching art, rely more on tactile experiences. Try sculpting and working with clay instead of drawing or coloring.
Now let's talk about the use of visual aids and the assistive technology. First, provide Braille textbooks and handouts.
As soon as we discover that we will have a visually impaired or blind student in our class, we should order all class textbooks in Braille. We can also have all of our course materials and handouts transferred into Braille by using Braille translation software. This process can take quite some time, so be sure to plan well in advance.
And second, encourage the use of page magnifiers.
Page magnifiers can be used by students with visual impairments to help enlarge images and text presented in any book or handout. This will assist students with visual impairments in all reading course material. These devices are relatively easy to use and range in cost and effectiveness.
For the last part of the teaching strategies, let us now talk about how can we provide or create a safe learning environment for our students. First, sit visually impaired students close to the front.
In order to give visually impaired or blind students an equal opportunity to succeed in the classroom, sit them near the front of the room close to the board. While teaching, we should stand near the visually impaired child. This will allow them to hear us better.
Second, consider lighting and glare.
Visually impaired students often experience light sensitivity issues, so sitting them away from the window and other glaring light is beneficial. Try and control the glare in the classroom by using blinds and curtains. Light should be distributed evenly throughout the room for optimal visual effect.
Third, ensure that there's always large walkways between furnitures.
Leave ample spaces between desks, chairs, cabinets, and shelves. This will make it easier for visually impaired and blind students to navigate through the classroom without bumping into objects. Make sure the cupboard doors and drawers are always closed and that chairs are neatly tucked under the desks.
And lastly, number 4, maintain a consistent classroom arrangement.
Once you have created the classroom layout at the beginning of the school year, leave the furniture in the same place. Visually impaired and blind students will learn the layout and be able to navigate their way around the classroom. In case you arrange the furniture and seating arrangement, this can cause confusion for these students and will add unnecessary stress to their learning environment.
So now let's proceed to educational program. How schools accommodate visual disabilities. Many schools are taking a number of steps to create more accommodating learning environments for students with visual disabilities. Accommodations generally center on increasing accessibilities and contributing to a more welcoming campus, culture, and community in general. So there are stops and instructor training. So students with visual disabilities succeed educationally when instruction and services are provided appropriately and are tailored to each student's unique needs. So training staff and instructors in inclusive teaching strategies geared toward students with visual disabilities contributes to a better learning experience. And the other one is incorporating assistive technology. So there is a gap when looking at the depth of technology training around the use of access technology for youth who are blind or have low vision. So many of youth go on to post-secondary with an inadequate access technology skills, and this can often create issues to their ultimate success and the number of years toward completion. And the other one is tape recording of lectures. Students with visual disabilities can record lectures and, if necessary, transcribe the lecture into Braille. Access to lecture information is reasonable accommodation that disabilities offices can support, and students should work with that office and faculty members on a policy of recorded lectures. And the other one is additional time to complete work and exams. So as a teacher or instructors, we need give time, or we need add their time to complete work and examinations. The process of reading, studying, and completing assignments requires more time for students with visual disabilities than sighted students. Students can arrange accommodation that allows for additional time to complete assignments, extended time to complete in-class examination, or opportunities to take tests in separate settings. And the free use of note takers and readers. Taking notes during class lecture is an important part of being able to study and learn the required material. Students can secure the services of an assigned note taker through their college's disability office. Note takers are other students who take notes during each class, which can then be converted to Braille or large print for reading. So, some institution may also provide free access to a laptop computer or Braille note-taking device that allows students to take their own notes during class, especially those person have visual disabilities. And the next one is listening enhancer and computer aided transcription devices. Students with visual disabilities have different levels of hearing ability and may request specialized services that fit their needs, or some students may require speech application service in class, while others may need computer-assisted real-time transcription, and that's what we call CART. So what is CART? CART is a service where trained professionals attend class and use a steno machine and a specialized software to create a word-by-word script of the class proceedings. Those materials are then transcribed into a document a student can use as notes. And the next one is moving curriculum online. Moving curriculum online, online learning can create new access opportunities for students, but remain a barrier for students with visual disabilities. Accessibility of instructional materials, particular online content, can be a major challenge for students. So, according to Saliban, online learning components, such as a learning management system and textbooks, are usually visually based and rely on the student ability to see the screen and navigate the system using the mouse. Universities are making efforts to improve the accessibility of online learning labs and learning management systems, such as Blackboard, for students with visual disability. So, establishing a campus culture and accessibility for students with disability shows the institution commitment to creating a welcoming environment for all students.
And I'm going to show you a research video in some visual impaired in their workplace. So let's proceed. Let's watch this.
I'm Martine Abel and I'm at Auckland Council. I'm one of the specialist advisors.
My name's Peter Bear and I work as a chef at my camp Taupo.
I was born with a condition called Leber's congenital amaurosis. So at the moment I've got light and darkness perception, but that's all. I've lost my colour perception.
So if I'm looking at a person, I actually cannot see their face, but my peripheral vision is still pretty good. And so I use my peripheral vision to see everything.
I think the first challenge is possibly the physical access. You know, you get moved a fair bit, you accept appointments to meet in another building.
Well, this project analyzes the use of information communication technology by professionals with visual impairments in the workplace.
I would say that information and communications technology play a very, very important role to be a support element for them.
I've been making use of using an iPad, which has been really helpful to me, mainly because I can zoom up on anything that I need to read. For instance, reading invoices, checking of finer print, recording of information.
So I use a laptop with speech output program. I use smartphone with speech output. I use a portable Braille note taker.
I would say that information and communication technology has become an extension of their bodies.
Just being able to read again, it's been a great benefit to me using the iPad and technology around it.
Different organizations have different practices in terms of supporting people with visual impairments. We also find that policies are written documents, but things that are happening on the ground in action, sometimes they may not be exactly in sync.
It is not a matter of giving access to technology to these professionals only. It is about having the right policies in place, and more than policies, it is about having the right attitudes.
Messages to employers would be that it's not as daunting as you might think. Think of the person and the job you want them to do rather than the impairment or the disability.
There is technology out there. There is organizations like the New Zealand Blind that come into the work environment and can give support, can educate not only the person that has a low vision, but the employer. They can educate them and help them to understand.
If we can say that we create an environment that is positive for people from different races, why can't we do the same with people with different degrees of disabilities?
So I hope you learned from this video. So before we end to our presentation, I would like to share to you Bible verse in John chapter 9 verse 1 to 41. This is the whole chapter of John in chapter 9, that on the Sabbath day, Jesus heals a man born blind. So God heals a man who are blind. After Jesus heals a man, some Jews asking, they said, "How were thine eyes opened?" And he answered, the blind man answered and said, "A man that is called Jesus made a clay and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight." So if we relate this story in our life, as a future teacher, I know that I don't have a power to heal a man who are blind, right? But we have the Holy Spirit to open their hearts to Jesus, right? And God said in John chapter 9, verse 5, I will read. It says here, As long as I am in the world, I am I am the light of the world. All right. See, as a picture teacher, even though we are not as I am not a speed teacher, we need to be a light to them. We need to be a light to all the students, especially students with disabilities, right? I know in our teaching profession, someday we can encounter some student with disability. We need to be aware and we need to be knowledgeable to them. In John chapter 9 verse 39 says here, and Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. So as a future teacher, we need to be a good example to our students, that even there we need to be a good example to our students, to open their eyes and open their hearts to Jesus. So we need to have a character of Christ, so we can do this to our students, that they will feel that even I have disabilities, even I'm like this, the society and God accept me who I am, because I am able to do something and I am able to do what they do, even I am have disabilities. And I hope you learned a lot for today. Thank you.